Hi, it's Colleen, and welcome to the Syberia Designs first birthday release. How exciting! Today we're going to create a cohesive card using several design elements from her new release. So let's get started, shall we? Now, these are the items we're going to be using for my card today. First up is called Celebrations Sentiments. This is one stamp with probably 20 to 25 sentiments for all occasions. So you could stamp this and then use your paper trimmer to trim up each of the sentiments and set them aside for future use. I love the fact that this can be used in so many ways. And we're going to use it in a different way today. So second is called Shiny Diamond Stencil. And this is just a really pretty abstract stencil that works in a lot of ways for your backgrounds. This one is so fun. It's called Bokeh Balloon Stencil. There's 3 different size balloon stencils, and the stencils come with the negative portion and the positive portion, which I love. So you can see me here. Here's the negative part, 3 different size balloons, and then you also have the positive part. So there's a lot of ways that you can use this stencil for your cards, and I'm absolutely thrilled with this. We're going to be using this today for our background. And then finally we have Floral Balloon Extravaganza. It's a 6x8 stamp set with 3 different balloons. And if you notice, the balloons all have flowers on the bottom of them. Typical Alex, right? There's also a second layer that you can stamp on top to add a little design to your balloons, and several sentiments that are for birthdays and celebrations. And it also comes with a coordinating die set that you can see here. And what I love about Alex is that she also includes dies for your sentiments. So it really makes it easy to stamp a sentiment and die cut it out. So on top of using all this, we are using something new. Ta-da! It's a new Wow Trio set designed by Alex, Syberia Designs. This one is called Delicate Blooms. Set of 3 embossing powders, and I'm going to show you right now. They were created to work together, which is really what Wow is all about. The first one is called Rosewater, and it's exactly that. It's a beautiful rose embossing powder. It is translucent, so it goes on very light, very delicate, very beautiful. The second embossing powder in the set is called Tranquil Azure, and this one is also a lovely, lovely mint green color. This is an opaque embossing powder, which means that when you emboss it, you won't see the any images behind it. And the third one, and the most bold, I think, is called the Sunlit Gleam. And this one actually has little white dots in it to add some texture. Now, I'm going to show you what they look like when they have been embossed. Here you have the Rosewater. You see how delicate that is, and you can see everything that's behind that. And then with the mint green, excuse me, same there. You can pretty much see what's behind it. But with this yellow one, you cannot see what is behind it. So you want to take that into consideration when you are embossing, if you use translucent or opaque. And it does let you know on the Wow cover whether it's marked with an O or a T. But these are so beautiful and well coordinated. I am so excited to use them today. And I'm going to show you a card I made using these embossing powders. So here you can see this is a birthday card, and I used the Shiny Diamond Stencil with the Sunlit Gleam embossing powder in the back, and then each of the balloons were stamped with one of the embossing powders along with the sentiment. And look at how shiny and glorious and beautiful that card turned out. It's just such a happy, happy card. Here's the card we're going to replicate today. This also uses a lot of design elements, and I wanted to show you how fun it is to use the celebration sentiments in more than the way they were meant to be used. That's what we're going to do today. But we're going to change it up a little bit from this card just to add a little bit of variety. So the first step is to create the background. Now I have the largest balloon from the Bokeh Balloons stencil, and I'm going to create a background using this balloon, the stencil, and some rose colored ink. I wanted to keep this background very light, very subtle, so that it complements my focal point. I don't want my background to compete with my focal point. I want it to complement it. So I want to be careful that it's not too bold. So continuing to build my background of balloons that look like they're just floating in the air effortlessly, pretty in pink. And then I'll be ready for my next step. Now you can see my balloons are done, which they look so pretty. And the next step is going to be to take these celebration sentiments, and I'm going to stamp that right over the top of the balloons. I love how it is one stamp set, which makes it so easy for you to line it up and line it up straight. I always get sentiments crooked, and I think that this stamp set will take that problem away from me because it will stamp it straight for me. In this case, I am using a really light gray ink to stamp my celebration sentiments because I don't want it to be too bold. See how pretty that looks? And it's not too bold because of the light gray ink. It's beautiful. Now the bold, it looks pretty good too in the background, but I wanted to show you different ways to use that celebration sentiments and the balloon. Now I'm going to work on my focal point, and I'm going to stamp the largest balloon from Floral Balloon Extravaganza in a permanent black ink. And permanent black ink is something I use when I'm going to be coloring with my alcohol markers because it won't bleed. So I got it stamped, and then I'm going to get ready to die cut it because I want to do some ink blending. I'm sorry if you hear some noise in the background. We're having work done on the outside of our house, and they started right in the middle of my voiceover, and I really don't want to start over again, so please forgive the noise in the background. So I'm going in with some ink blending. I'm using 3 different inks, and I'm creating a what you would call an ombre look. These are little details that I like to add to my design elements to take a card from average to wow. Every little detail you add will make your card that much more powerful. So now it's time to color my flowers, and I'm just using some Copic markers in just a couple colors. These are really small flowers, so I'm not getting too stressed out about how much detail I add to them. Really, I just want to add some color to help these balloons, bring this balloon to life. So the leaves are just your basic green, and then the flowers will be pink because that will kind of match that rose background. One of the things that I have learned about creating a cohesive card is to limit the number of colors that you use to maybe no more than 3, 4 at the most. That way, your colors aren't competing with each other. And you get away with more design elements that way too. So now that my coloring and inking was done, I'm going to go in and add another detail to my balloon using the shiny diamond stencil. So I'm just protecting my flowers because I don't want to put, I don't want to stencil the flowers. I just want to stencil the balloon. And then, oops, I forgot to add my embossing buddy. This embossing putty is like an anti-static tool. So your embossing powder doesn't go where you don't want it to go. It's really an essential piece to embossing. I use the Wow embossing pad because I just like it. But there are several embossing pads on the market. Versamark is another good one. And I'm just juicing it up a little bit with my conditioner so that I have plenty of that sticky ink to put through my stencil. And in this case, I am using a blending tool. This blending tool is dedicated only to my embossing powder, and I use it in cases like this when I'm only embossing a small little part. That way I'm not wasting my embossing paste. So now that's done, I can take my stencil off, remove it, and get ready to emboss it. Now you see I've laid out a white piece of 8.5 by 11 paper here. This paper is going to catch the excess embossing powder as I spread it out. You can see me doing it here using Sunlit Gleam, and the extra embossing powder will be able to go right back into the container by using that piece of white paper. And now you see this octagonal, whatever it's called, cork board, and my heat tool. The cork helps everything heat faster, and you can see the heat tool working very quickly. And you know your embossing is done when it goes from a matte finish to a shiny finish. So that's how you know when your embossing is finished. Now look how shiny that looks, and you can see those little white dots adding a lot of texture from this embossing powder from the trios. So now my balloon is done, and I can glue, and I'm gluing 2 more die cuts together over this one because I want this balloon to be really sturdy, and I also want it to pop off a little bit from the page. So that's a little trick I use, is I die cut a few of them and I glue them together. Now I'm going to stamp the sentiment from the Floral Balloon Extravaganza set. So I am prepping it once again because I'm going to heat emboss it with a white embossing powder. I'm keeping it very simple. I want the sentiment to pop, so I'm using white embossing powder so I'm sure that it will stand out. And I'm using the same process that I did when I embossed the balloon. Grab my white piece of paper, add my white embossing powder, and then I pick up the excess embossing powder by dumping it from the paper back into the container. Bam, it's done, and now I can heat emboss it and my sentiment's good to go. Now I use a Wow heat tool, but there are several heat tools on the market you could use, and all of them I think are equally good. So when my sentiment is done, I can use the coordinating die from the stamp set and die cut my sentiment out, and then I am ready to put my card together. I have all my pieces here, my pretty background with my Bokeh Balloons and my celebration sentiments. I trimmed it down and I'm applying it over a 5.5 by 4.25 card base. And then I die cut a piece of vellum using about the middle size of the Syberia Designs scalloped edge dies, because I wanted to put a little buffer behind that background so that this balloon will pop out even more. And I feel like that vellum kind of makes the background a little more subtle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the glue over the vellum, but only behind the balloon. So you will not see any glue peeking out from behind that translucent vellum. I really love that. Now I can finish with my sentiment, and this card is done. Yeah. And I'm going to compare it to the other card, the original card I made, so you can see the difference. One isn't better than the other. I just like to change it up a bit so that you can see the different ways that you can use color and texture and everything. So they're both beautiful. Thank you so much for stopping by. Syberia Designs is celebrating their first birthday with a celebratory new release and an extra big giveaway with a grand total of $1,000 in prizes. Hop along for tons of inspiration and for a chance to win. All of the hoppers and the prizes will be listed in my description box.